Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is a session, part of the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate, who are holding a climate summit this week in advance of the global climate negotiations that will be held in Glasgow as part of COP26. This is an opportunity for you all to see, I think for the first time, the Act Now film, which has got the subtitle Amplifying Youth Voices on Climate. This is a project that colleagues at the University of Bath Institute for Policy Research and Cambridge Zero have been preparing very carefully over the past at least 6 months. It was launched as part of the UK's COP26 Universities Network activities earlier this year as part of the Climate Expo that we held. And we asked
Hi everyone, sorry, please bear with us while we just bring Alyssa back online. Katie, would you like to jump in and just quickly tell everyone a little bit about ActNowFilm?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So while we're just waiting for Alyssa to come back, so as Alyssa was saying, ActNowFilm is an official COP26 Universities project, co-led by Cambridge Zero and the Institute for Policy Research at Bath. And we sent out, working with a young group of volunteers, we sent out social media asking young people from all around the world to send us their thoughts and their experiences of climate change and tell us what their hopes and fears were, and also their demands for the negotiators at COP. And working with the student team, they then transcribed them all, translated them all, and have worked with a film production company called Octopus Films to put it together into a film that is debuting today at this event, and that will also be shown in person, as it were, in the Green Zone at COP on Thursday, the 11th of November. But we've been delighted to be supported by the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate, GALC, with really getting the message out there. And we've had lots and lots of students from the GALC universities who have contributed to the film. So we're very, very grateful for that and for the opportunity to have this fantastic event today. So I'm just going to check whether Alyssa is back with us. Is Alyssa back with us? No, not yet. Okay, so the shape of today's event is as follows. It's being recorded, it's being broadcast, I believe, on YouTube, and it will also be uploaded afterwards to the GALC website if you missed something and would like to dial back in and have another look. We've got some fantastic speakers for you today. We've got 4 speakers. So our speakers will be Caroline Hickman from Bath University, who is going to be talking to us about some fascinating research she has been undertaking, really understanding the impact of climate change on youth in terms of climate anxiety. So she's going to be talking to us about her research. Welcome, Caroline. We're also going to hear from Dr. Anna Barford. Oh, I believe Alyssa is back again. So Alyssa, I will hand back to you. Thank you.
Sorry, please excuse my technical challenges that I had here. I know that Katie was just jumping in to introduce the speakers. So as she said, we've got, launching this film, we've got a conversation that we can have now really to engage with this issue of youth, what young people around the world want to see happen about climate change. And so we're going to look at that from 2 angles. We have a great lineup of speakers. The first 2 will be talking about their research projects, and those research projects are very focused on young people in different parts of the world. And then we're going to hear from 2 young people who have been involved in the Act Now film that you'll see later on, to talk about the importance of youth climate voices and the kind of things that they're doing themselves. And I suspect you're going to find that all very inspiring. I'll introduce the speakers one at a time as they come in, but please note that we're going to end with about half an hour for questions and answers. And we really would like you to jump on in and put your questions in the chat box, in the questions and answers box, as you think of them. And then towards the end of the session, we'll be able to ask all of our panelists any questions that you like. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Anna Barford. She's based at the University of Cambridge, and she's doing research on the impacts of climate change on young people in Uganda. So I'll hand over to you now, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the project I want to speak to you about today is about how young people in Uganda are adjusting to life with climate change. We already know that climate change is, of course, already happening. So the project that we're doing here is trying to understand how young people who are already facing challenges of underemployment and the difficulty of making a livelihood respond to that kind of additional challenge, which is layered on top of the challenges they're already facing. So just to give you a bit of context, Uganda is the third youngest country in the world when we measure this demographically. So the average age in Uganda is 15.8 years old. The youth population in Uganda is largely underemployed, which means people are working, but they're not working as much as they'd like to, and they're maybe not being as productive as they'd like to be as well in their work. So 67% of young people in Uganda are seen as being underemployed. So there's a huge shortage of jobs. And this means that all those kind of pathways to resilience of kind of having a bit of savings or having a more durable home or maybe having stronger infrastructure aren't as available to the young people we've been working with as they might have been in other countries. Sorry, just before I move on, I'd just like to say my partners for this project are Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, and Restless Development, which is a really large youth-led NGO working across many different countries. And the work's funded by the British Academy. So the project's aim is to, in the words of my colleague Adam Branch, is to see how climate change is not taking place at an abstract level, but instead it's in the neighbourhoods and in the places where young people live and work. And we've seen that young people can be particularly vulnerable to some of these disruptions. We've seen it with the COVID-19 crisis as well. Young people have been impacted more than older adults have been because of that, the fact of how they're transitioning towards their kind of adult lives and putting in place the building blocks for their adult lives. And that moment, I think, is a particularly sensitive moment when your school to work transition gets disrupted. It can be hard to kind of rebuild from that. So just in terms of what's already happening in Uganda, this is a map that we made from a review of a few different events just over the past kind of 2 or 3 years, really. And you can see various different impacts kind of happening simultaneously in different regions. So Lake Victoria, the large lake at the bottom of your screen, has experienced lowering water levels, and Lake Victoria feeds the River Nile, and that's also got lowering water levels. Elsewhere, drought is affecting people and it's disrupting agriculture. In the Baduda region, which has become sadly quite famous for its landslides, which is around the Mount Elgon, so it's very mountainous, and heavy rain kind of saturates the clay soils, and then when the soil becomes like a certain amount of saturation, you end up seeing really quite dramatic landslides, which have displaced lots of people and kill people from time to time as well. So this is just like something to give a sense of what people are already facing today. Perhaps one of the kind of most acute and immediate impacts that we can observe is when people are forced to move from where they live. So this graph shows, again, like just in the past 4 years, large displacements which have resulted from weather events. You can see that it's mainly flood events, but there are some landslide events as well, which are displacing people. And just for context, this is only the displacements which are over 1,000 people. If we'd included displacements under 1,000 people, we'd have had many, many more bars on this chart. But at the extreme, there's the displacement of 150,000 people in 2018. Counterintuitively, actually, some of the climate change-related displacement, which is harder to pinpoint, but actually larger in scale, is the kind of the slow onset events, whereas what I'm showing here is rapid onset events, just to give you a sense of what people are responding to. So now I just want to share the words of one of the young researchers we've been working with. Our project is very reliant and completely dependent upon a group of young researchers who've been trained to gather data and have been involved kind of throughout the research process. And they've also been involved in the analysis, and they've been involved in the outreach as well at this stage. So anyway, Onan Alindi Felix says, and he's talking about agriculture. We plant, and then the rain washes away what we plant. Recently, we received little rain, which means it's harder to plant rice as it dries out. Young people cannot go to school because not enough was earned from selling rice. And then there are early marriages too. People get frustrated because rice is not working, but without an alternative to go to. So we get from this a sense that actually, while some people are able to adjust, other people feel really quite helpless or unsure of what the response should be to the disruptions that they're seeing. In terms of what adjustments are being made, we did a big survey. So we surveyed over 1,200 people, as well as interviewing over 100 young people and doing some focus groups and expert interviews as well. But from the survey, we found that 31% of respondents have already started adapting their livelihoods in response to environmental changes. So this includes things like more irrigation by hand, particularly when there's a drought, planting trees. And planting trees became a really important part of the conversation for lots of young people. Crop diversification to spread the risk and have crops which are maybe more resilient in different ways. Leaving their villages, like we've already seen some of that displacement data earlier. Starting new businesses or trying to do businesses that are a bit more resilient, such as brewing or brick making, and also sharing environmental messages, which can be kind of education rolled in with activism in some cases. I don't want to glorify these responses, because while they are very important and they are kind of helping people to get by, they're constrained, and quite often the things that people are doing to help them respond, the new activity is also susceptible to being impacted by climate change as well. So, for example, one of the young researchers we're working with, Peace and Beza, she is a chicken farmer to try and become more resilient to climate change. And what she experienced is actually with increasing temperatures, her chickens are experiencing more heat stress, which is making them ill, which then translates into more costs in terms of medication for her chickens, and also loss of birds as well. But she was also saying how if there's a poor harvest one year, you can find that the price of grain goes up, and then the price of your chicken feed goes up. So then the costs associated with chicken farming go up too. So while agriculture really is the kind of like growing crops agriculture, it's the kind of at the front line of climate change in many ways. There's plenty of non-agricultural activities, such as the quote below about young people putting up temporary canteens to make small businesses, which then get flooded away. Quite a lot of these other businesses are also susceptible to the impacts of climate change too. One really striking finding that we came across was that actually 70%, 76%, so 3/4 of the young people we surveyed had their livelihoods disrupted by environmental changes. And interestingly, roughly the same number, about 3/4 again, reported not having adequate information about how the environment is changing. And 62%, so about 2/3, didn't know where to get accurate information on local weather patterns. So we have this really kind of difficult situation where most people are being impacted by climate change, but don't fully understand what's causing it, why it's happening, and similarly don't necessarily have the training to know how best to respond to it, despite already trying to respond as well as they can. Looking forwards, I think it's really important to acknowledge two things. One is, sadly, climate change is set to get worse. So a lecturer in Makerere University, David Mfutumukiza, reminds us that rainfall will be more frequent and more intense by the year 2100. There will be more floods, more dry spells and dry conditions, and higher evaporation rates, so the soils dry out. Of course, if the soils dry out, then they can end up blowing away too, which causes more problems. So climate change is set to get worse, which we know. Also, the youth population of particularly Africa is set to get higher. So if you can see this, the kind of the mid-green line, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this line kind of, which is just basically heading almost completely consistently upwards. That's the youth population of Africa. So, and when you look at a country like Uganda, where the youth population is very, very young, there's something called population momentum, which means that the population will keep growing for a certain number of years, just kind of powered by the age structure that's there. And that means that if we can't solve these challenges of climate change, lack of jobs, and the difficulties of adaptation now with a smaller youth population and milder version of climate change, and we really need to work out very quickly what to do before this situation looks set to get worse. And young people are amazing. They're responding already. They're doing exactly the best thing they can, given their knowledge, their experience, their expertise, and experience of what it's like to live with climate change now. I think one thing we can't do is kind of think, well, then that's fine. We'll just leave them to it, because they need support. There's a lot of money that's been pledged to support poorer countries, and I think young people should certainly be benefiting from that. So this is a little interchange between one of the young interviewees and a young researcher. So the interviewee says, "In the future, who knows? I will also go begging on the streets." And the researcher says, "Oh no, in Jesus' name, you won't go begging, my dear. I trust you, and you're a creative person." And this begging in the future is referring to the possibility of being impacted by climate change, so needing to find a way to make a living. And the interviewee says, "Madame, the creativity that you're talking about is nothing when the worst comes to the worst." So that sense that, however creative and resilient the young person is, if you're facing a very big challenge, that's not always enough on its own without wider structural support. So just to finish up, we've come up with some recommendations of what we'd like to see to support young people based on what they told us. So firstly, education should emphasise climate change and adaptation strategies. This needs to be built in from primary school upwards. Training is needed in alternative and climate resilient livelihoods. Young people need stable income sources and finance to support their adaptations. And policy dialogue should be inclusive in order to engage young people's expertise. And then I just wanted to flag a couple of reports. So we wrote a Young People and Climate Change report for the British Academy earlier this year. And during COP on the 5th of November, which is Youth Day, we're going to launch a new report, Living in the Climate Crisis, Young People in Uganda. So do look out for it. I'll stop there. But thank you for inviting me to this event, and I really look forward to seeing your film, and congratulations with it.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was fantastic, really interesting, and lots more to dive into there. It's my pleasure to introduce the second speaker, who also does research with young people, and that's Caroline Hickman. She's at the University of Bath, and she does work on eco-anxiety, and she's going to talk to us about how to help and support children and young people to navigate the challenges of eco-anxiety, dealing with this challenge that we have a climate emergency, and that could represent to some a transformational moment and a real opportunity, but to others, really challenging apocalyptic disaster. And she knows much more about how these issues are affecting young people today and what we can do about it. So I'll hand over to you now, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. And thank you for inviting me here as well. I really am very pleased to be joining you here today. So I've been researching with children and young people globally. I'm a psychotherapist and I do psychosocial research. So my research initially has been with young people globally about how they feel the emotional impact of climate change. And I've been doing that for 10 years. So I want to start with a few quotes from young people from that research. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about eco-anxiety and how we can frame that, particularly in relation to children and young people. And then I'm going to present the quantitative research that I've done with a group of colleagues from 6 different universities and give you the figures that we've done recently with 10,000 children across 10 different countries in the world. So from my qualitative research, this is children in the Maldives. They said to me, we always create what we're always afraid of, humanity. And we always fear death. So humanity is creating our own death in the apocalypse. Another teenager in the Maldives said to me, I'm sad, my friends are dying. My friends, the fish, are dying. Another one said to me, you know, we saw online that people in Iceland had a funeral for a glacier. It's a beautiful ritual. They said, but we're going to be underwater soon. So who's going to have a funeral for us? Children in the UK have been saying to me, climate change is happening to rebalance something that was out of balance. And it's the ignorance of adults who are not listening to the children. People have lost sight of what's really important. Climate change is happening as revenge because you've messed up the planet. So, having started with their voices, I'm now going to take us on a short, very short, apologetically short journey through eco-anxiety to eco-empathy and eco-aliveness to try and frame this so that we can start to think psychologically. Environmental problems with biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse and climate change. And with 30 years good science, we can address that. But I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Well, perhaps those scientists with social scientists, psychologists do know how to do that. I hope so. Paul Hoggart from the Climate Psychology Alliance, I think, also sort of really gets to the heart of what we're dealing with emotionally, relationally, psychologically. He says we're living in a time when a tragedy which is without precedent is unfolding in front of our eyes. And we're witnessing catastrophic rates of species extinction, biodiversity loss, soil and ocean exhaustion, and runaway climate change. There are some key words here for us psychologically, and it's the living in it and witnessing. So we're living with something. This is unfolding in front of our eyes. Psychologically, this makes sense as to why it can sometimes be so hard to grasp. This is what Timothy Morton refers to as a hyperobject, that when you get hold of one part, the other parts disappear from you. And then you turn towards those parts and other parts emerge. This is really a strong argument about having a global understanding, a global empathy, which is, I'm saying, in support of this film that I can't wait to see in a minute. So what's the healthy, emotionally healthy response to all of this? Well, all of this, frankly. Eco-anxiety, grief and solastalgia, which is grief for the loss of the place that you love. Hope and hopelessness, anger, blame, frustration, guilt and shame, sadness, grief. And of course, we're going to have fantasies of rescue. If we plant 1 billion trees, we'll all be all right, or carbon capture, or apocalyptic fantasies. It's all over. What's the point? And this is going to kick off psychologically all of our defenses and our avoidance, denial, delay, disavowal. We'll go into some nihilism. What's the point? What's the hope? And despair. Emotionally healthy responses will encompass all of this. It's a kind of emotional biodiversity, but preferably not all on the same Tuesday afternoon. we don't want to be feeling this all at once. But when you're engaged in climate activism, what happens is climate activists move through all of these emotions, one after another, after another, after another. And the key message I want to give us to think about is they all have their place. They all have a powerful place in helping us to navigate the complexity of what we're facing here. So what the psychology brings here is this emotional internal activism, which can go alongside and complement and be part of that external activism. We need both. We need both and solutions, not either or solutions to this. And then there are mature defenses. How do we support ourselves through all this journey? Acceptance, altruism, courage, self-regulation, self-sufficiency. We heard some of that in the previous speaker about how communities were fostering that. Forgiveness, gratitude, humility, humor, short-term suppression, take a night off, tolerance, self-talk. This is how we support ourselves emotionally and build the emotional intelligence, emotional resilience that we need. And this then is part of a framework which will allow us to transform eco-anxiety, to reframe it. Eco-anxiety is an emotionally healthy response to the reality of what we're seeing going on in the world today. We measure mental health, we evaluate by looking at our capacity to respond to external reality. And external reality is increasingly frightening, especially when we take a global perspective. So we don't want to get rid of this anxiety because it's a healthy response. But what we do want to do is use that anxiety and encourage it into a different relationship of action, through eco-understanding, eco-empathy, eco-compassion, courage, community, awareness, which is what projects like this are all about, connection, belonging. This is creating a global community. Eco-meaning, there is meaning in all of these emotional responses and care. And this helps us feel emotionally alive with what we're engaged with. We can't escape it. Because the truth is, to live fully in the world means to also feel the anxiety that goes with the territory of being a vulnerable human being. So the research that we launched a few weeks ago, which is due to be published in the Lancet Planetary Health in a few weeks' time, is 10,000 children and young people aged 16 to 24 across these 10 different countries: Australia, Brazil, Finland, France, India, Nigeria, Philippines, Portugal, the UK and the US. We wanted to get a representative enough sample from this range of countries. As you can see, some, and I apologize for this language, it's clumsy, but a number in the global north and in the global south, with some communities facing the immediate impact of climate change now, such as the Philippines, Nigeria. And here's some of what we found, that 8 out of 10 children and young people across the world, these are the global figures, including the UK, worried that climate change was threatening people and the planet. But we also looked at the impact on daily functioning, daily life. And 45% of this 10,000 young people told us it was having a negative impact on daily functioning, eating, concentrating, work, school, playing, having fun. In the UK, this figure was lower, 28%. And we would put this down to the fact that the immediate physical impact of climate change in the UK is not that great at the moment. But you'll see in a minute that the emotional impact really is significant in the UK. So I don't want to just give UK statistics. So here is the worldwide breakdown, and you can see the global impact in terms of daily functioning, not surprisingly, is much higher in the Philippines and in India than on the other end of the scale, we've got the UK and the US. I apologize, I'm going through this horrendously quickly, but I just want to give an overview. So we asked about feelings first. How does climate change make you feel? And worldwide figures showed us that 67% were sad, 67% afraid, 62% anxious, and you can see the decline down to 29% indifferent. I would explain the indifference as defense and emotional defense when things are overwhelming, that you just give up, you just shut down emotionally. I do apologize, this is horribly fast, but I want to just give you a complete overview. And here's the UK emotional figures. And now you can see that although the impact on daily functioning in the UK is less, the emotional response is very similar to the global figure. The global figure for sad and anxious was 67%, and sad and afraid rather. And here in the UK, you've got 63 and 62%. Not that big a difference at all. So we couldn't argue from this that emotionally, children in the global north, such as the UK, are emotionally as engaged as the rest of the children in countries such as the Philippines and Nigeria. Then we asked children and young people about their thoughts. What do they think? It's not just about how do you feel, but how do you think? And over half, 55% worldwide, 53% UK, thought they won't have access to the same opportunities their parents had. Over half, 52% worldwide, 39% UK, think their family's security will be threatened. Again, you can see this is a much lower figure in the UK. Over half, 55% worldwide, 47% UK, think the things they most value will be destroyed. Closing the gap there. 8 out of 10, worldwide, 83%, 80% UK, think that people have failed to take care of the planet. So emotionally, relationally, cognitively, the children in the UK are matching, feeling and thinking very similarly to the children in the Philippines. 3/4, 75% worldwide, 73% UK, think that the future is frightening. 4 out of 10, 39% worldwide, 38% UK, are hesitant to have children because of climate change. This is about trust in the future. Over half, 56% worldwide, 51% in the UK, think that humanity is doomed. So, what did we do with this? Well, we also wanted to talk about links to governments, links to adults, people in power. And part of what we wanted to find out about was how children and young people were responded to when they tried to talk about these frightening, worrying thoughts and feelings. And we found that nearly half worldwide, 48% of children and young people, felt dismissed or ignored by other people when they tried to talk about climate change. Well, I'm sure we're all familiar with the narratives. Go back to school. Stop worrying about it. So then we asked about relation to governments. And because this is what I'd been discovering in my previous qualitative research, but that has only been with 300 children and young people globally, and this is 10,000 children and young people globally. And we can see the large numbers. 65% believe that governments are failing young people. 64% believe that governments are lying about the impact of their action. 60% believe that governments are dismissing the distress of children and young people and betraying not just themselves, but future generations as well. The 57% believe that the governments are not acting in accordance to science. Over 60% that they're not protecting the planet or children. Over 60% believe governments cannot be trusted or doing enough to prevent the worst impact of climate change or taking these young people's concerns seriously. So what are we talking about here? Those are the UK respondents, 65% failing young people. We're talking about young people and children feeling abandoned and betrayed, angry, ashamed, belittled, silenced, disallowed from talking about how they feel and being left with these feelings. And there is hope. Young people can feel reassured, protected, valued, and hopeful. Very interesting. I've presented this research numerous times in the last month to groups of adults and children and young people. And the communication after I've presented the research, adults frequently, and I know I'm generalizing horribly, please forgive me, but on the whole, generally, a lot of adults say, this is depressing, this is scary, these research findings are really awful. And then the messages start to come into the Zoom from children and young people saying, this research gives me hope. This research makes me feel better. Now I feel listened to. I feel validated. I absolutely did not do this on my own. Amazing group of researchers with Dr. Liz Marks from the University of Bath, Panu Pikala from Finland, Susan Clayton, Eric Lewandowski from the United States, Eloise Mail from the UK YCC, Britt Ray from the States, Katrina Meller from the UK, Lise van Susteren from the States. And we were referenced in the opening speech from Antonio Guterres in the United Nations recently, opening to world leaders, which we were enormously grateful for, as you can imagine. I just want to finish with one last quote from another child in the Maldives who said, "We see climate change as being like the Avengers Endgame. It's like Thanos, whose ideology is to kill off half of life in the universe so the other half can thrive. But we're the half being killed off." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. That was very inspiring and really interesting the way you've connected your research with also a reminder about how important it is to empower young people and listen to their voices. And within that in mind, that's a great link for us to now invite Kekashan Basu to share with us some of her own experiences and tell us a little bit about what she's doing to take action on climate change. Thanks so much, Kekashan.
Thank you very much, Alyssa, and hello, everyone. My name is Kekashan. I'm a United Nations human rights champion and founder president of Green Hope Foundation. I began my journey in the field of intersectional climate justice through ground level actions 14 years ago when I was 7 years old, and I saw the image of this dead bird with its belly full of plastic, was deeply disturbed by it, and decided to start taking action by planting my first tree on my 8th birthday, which is also World Environment Day. So I thought I was preordained to become an eco-warrior. I continued working tirelessly on the ground, and 5 years after that, based on my ground level work, I was invited to be a delegate at the Rio Plus 20 Earth Summit in Brazil, the largest sustainable development conference of the time. And over there, I realized there was a severe lack of inclusivity of children in the sustainable development process. And so on my return home, I founded Green Hope Foundation, which is now a global social innovation enterprise that aims to provide a learning platform to empower children and young people globally to take actions in their own zones of influence using education for sustainable development as the transformative tool. And we work to bridge the gap between the top-down and bottom-up processes as a UN-accredited organization that works tirelessly at the grassroots level with over 225,000 children and young people in 25 countries. Now, 6 years ago, when the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted, I was the youngest out of the 193 young people each selected to represent a UN member state at this adoption. And I've said then that the decisions we make today will impact our future. And what we do at Green Hope Foundation is to localize the Sustainable Development Goals to ensure climate justice and intersectional climate justice at the ground level with communities affected most by climate change. So how do we do that? We work particularly in areas that are affected both by climate change and extremely high levels of poverty, working with their children and youth and providing them with the tools for empowerment. We work to address hunger, to ensure zero hunger for all. We do this through our livestock distribution campaigns and the planting of fruit trees, which enables the women and girls, particularly of the villages there, to have a sustainable source of income that allows them to support their families as well as go to school and have a good education. In more urban environments, but also rural environments, we have our Grow Your Own Food campaign for good health and climate justice, where our children's board members, all below the age of 13, are growing their own food to create a climate smart circular bioeconomy within their own zones of influence, which are their homes and their schools. As I mentioned earlier, we use education for sustainable development as the core of our work. And for us, we work to ensure that this education is rooted in lived experiences and the ground level experiences of the people that we work with, whether it's in Vietnam or in Liberia. And since most of the children and youth we work with have never been to school, we use creative modes of communication such as music, art, dance, drama, sport, writing, eco-fashion to spread awareness and really allow them to learn and have fun at the same time. A lot of our programs also focus on educating the educators, so providing teachers and non-formal educators with the resources to provide climate resilience education to their students, whether that's in urban or rural areas. Now, during the pandemic, we've continued this outreach through our high-level webinars with climate justice experts such as former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, to amazing young people who are working at the grassroots. And this is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo all the way to India. Now, I mentioned earlier how we focus on women and girls, and we've seen how women and girls are affected most by climate change-induced disasters, and girls specifically are really affected once climate change-induced disasters hit. So we focus on sustainable finance, skills-based education, sustainable fishing, sustainable farming, workshops and protection from sexual assault in these climate vulnerable areas. And we've also seen how lack of access to clean water and sanitation is exacerbated when climate change-induced disasters hit. So in communities in Kenya, for instance, we are providing them with biodegradable water storage containers that allows them to store the water so that the girls do not have to walk further and further every year due to climate change to fetch water and firewood for their homes and families, and can instead go to school. And we've also constructed deep bore tube balls in climate vulnerable villages in Bangladesh to provide the clean arsenic-free water. We've constructed toilets, and particularly next to the schools, so that the girls feel safe going to school, safe from sexual harassment and assaults. And at those schools, which I'll talk about later, we provide them with climate resilience education. And we've also provided rainwater harvesting systems where in areas that are affected severely by heavy monsoons in climate vulnerable areas. Now, a lot of our work also focuses on clean energy, and we kind of link this with all of our other climate resilience work. So whether that's distributing solar lamps from Nepal to the Sundarbans to India to enable children and young people to have a source of clean energy at night to study, or installing solar street lights to provide safe spaces in these areas, particularly for the women and girls. This right here is in Bangladesh. And solar grids in the homes and schools and community centers to power education. We do this in a way that allows for the creation of a climate smart bioeconomy as well. This right here is in Liberia, where we have the similar solar grid and solar streetlights. And what's really cool is that we're using the solar energy to power computer literacy education. So here we just had our first class of graduates just a few weeks ago, where with these skills, they're now able to get green jobs and create their own green jobs to uplift their entire community out of poverty in a climate vulnerable situation. We've also distributed solar cookers to women in Western India for them to not continue to use the harmful to both people and planet stoves that used to sometimes kill them as well. And our solar-powered mobile libraries are taking books to the doorstep of over 250,000 children across Bangladesh and India currently to provide them with education. And these are the girls who've been forced to drop out of school, not just due to COVID, but due to climate change-induced disasters as well, to take care of their families. So we make sure that their education is not out of their hands anymore. And our solar irrigation system enables young farmers to practice climate-smart agriculture and continue to provide food to their families and to their communities. Now, a lot of our work also focuses on providing decent work opportunities, particularly to women and girls in climate vulnerable areas. We've started a sewing school that even during the pandemic has been extremely beneficial for the women and girls to have a stable source of income and allows the girls to fund their education at school. We've installed routers to enable digital connectivity where, due to climate change and COVID-19, children and especially girls are missing out on online education. And with this, we continue to provide them with climate resilience education. And a lot of our work is also focused on engaging the private sector because, yes, they get a very bad rep for being our biggest polluters, and rightfully so. But at the same time, we engage them in dialogue so that they're not left out of this process and we can educate them and bring them into this dialogue. So we work with hotels and construction industries in this aspect. And really, all of our work is on reducing inequality. So whether we are working in the Rohingya refugee camps in Kutupalong or the Syrian refugee camps, homes for children of prisoners, homes for HIV-positive children, really aiming to leave no one behind and ensure a life of dignity for all. And we also work on intergenerational solidarity, so really bringing in the cross-generational knowledge to the table so that we're able to together create a more climate-friendly future for all. Now, our education campaigns yield a lot of ground-level actions. So some of those numbers are over 638 beach, park, ravine, canal cleanups across the world, from Bali to Oman, recycling over 250,000 kilos of waste, planting over 300,000 trees to mitigate climate change and achieve land degradation neutrality. We work extensively on turtle conservation, both sea and river turtle conservation. We've planted more than 7,000 mangroves in climate vulnerable areas to provide them with the natural barrier against natural disasters and protect both people and planet. And we work extensively on peace, whether that is conversing with the highest levels of policymaking at the UN, to working on the ground through music and art and through our We Want Books, Not Nukes campaign to really promote how climate change creates a lack of peace in our most vulnerable communities. And finally, we work with and partner with education boards across the world, from the Toronto District School Board, where I am in Toronto, to Dubai's Education Board, to the Youth Parliament in Suriname, to really ensure that education is the way forward in terms of ensuring climate justice for all. So very quickly, to conclude, at Green Hope Foundation, our work focuses on ensuring that we can adopt a human and planetary lens towards addressing climate change. And it's not just climate action, but the intersectional climate justice through ground level actions that really takes into account the lived realities of those working at the ground level and those who are most vulnerable to climate change, to really ensure a more holistic approach and really create a sustainable world for all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kakashan. A huge range and number of activities that you've taken and led and are inspiring people to take all around the world, which is great to see young people really taking action in so many different ways and across all of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is also very powerful. So thank you so much for that. We're now going to hear from another young person's perspective in terms of taking action. So if I can please welcome Huiyu to tell us a little bit about climate change from your perspective.
Hi, thank you, Alyssa. Dear friends, good morning, good afternoon. Greetings from Beijing, China. I am a food activist. We know that the biggest threat of climate change is the collapse of global food system. And food system contributes to 1/3 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. For the past over half a year, I came together with 30 youth leaders across the globe in a movement called Act for Food, Act for Change. A global campaign which brought over 100,000 youth signatures to the United Nations Food System Summit. And nearly half of them, over 50,000, are from China. We have also listed 17 actions for change, just to name a few: sustainable farming, food education, plant-based diets, and many more will bring hope. Revolving around the 17 actions, we have also built a youth advocate network, and we are so inspired by the actions of our youth advocates. We helped promote the ActNowFilm in our network and asked our advocates to speak out their voices, and 40 of them have submitted their short videos. Youth hold the largest stake and strongest influence in shaping our food systems. Change starts at home, but time is pressing. As this event is part of the COP Climate Summit, I want to highlight 2 actions. Before I graduated from Tsinghua University, I did case studies on food sustainability practices of COP member schools. I'm very impressed by Cambridge's sustainable food policy, which cut beef and lamb from menu and increased plant-based options, which turns out to have reduced nearly 1/3 greenhouse gas emissions. So I initiated a research project on how my university in China can make a difference for the climate through catering practices, which is now being taken forward by a group of younger students and supervised by the Institute of Climate Change at Tsinghua University, who convened COP. And I think this is a great example of how student-led initiative can influence policymakers. Food really holds the key to solve the climate emergency, and I want to take this opportunity to also call on GOC to pay more attention to and work together on food issues through joint research, student activities, and public engagement. After graduating, I joined the Good Food Fund, which is a nonprofit organization promoting healthy and sustainable food in China, and we have co-organized a food forward forum with Yale Hospitality. We took 7 chefs, including the executive chef of Peking University, to visit Yale, Harvard Culinary Institute of America, and a couple of more universities, and also Google headquarters. Recently, we have been closely discussing with the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative about involving more universities to this global network, using campus dining halls as living laboratories for behavior change. The Menus of Change University Research Collaborative leverages the unique position of universities to advance these types of lifelong food choices among students, and many of them will be influencers that can impact the world's food systems by connecting a diversity of insights from academic researchers, administrators, dining operators, students, and also nutrition and sustainability managers, and many other stakeholders. The impact we have on their eating habits will not only have a tremendous impact today, but can transform the food system for our zero carbon future. And lastly, I want to share that yesterday at the Nanjing Peace Forum, I curated a roundtable on youth leading sustainable food production and consumption, bringing together many youth champions in China, organizations that are willing to provide support to youth, and representatives from various government departments and industries of the city of Nanjing. Together, we launched the Nanjing Good Food Declaration, which expresses our commitment to take action and our shared desire to empower youth to drive a food system future. And the core propositions of our Good Food Declaration, including support youth in agriculture and food entrepreneurship, create environment for sustainable food consumption, is written into the city-level Nanjing Peace Consensus. Food is the future, and youth is the future. I'll stop here and thank you again, and I really look forward to watch the film and joining the discussions. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Hui, and for that deep dive, particularly into the issue of food, which we know has relevance to many aspects of climate change. So thank you for that. And so now, after all of those introductory discussions and perspectives on youth and climate, now is the moment where we get to see the film that's been prepared over these many months.
Hello, my name is Felix.
My name is Kehkasha.
My name is Samson.
Hello, my name is Julia.
I'm Cedric.
My name is Selena.
My name is Katie.
My name is Joel.
My name is Hannah.
My name is Shui.
Hi, this is Raya.
My name is Mama Ya.
My name is Amanda.
And I'm from Nepal,
India,
Trinidad and Tobago,
the Philippines,
Malawi,
Singapore,
Mexico,
Sri Lanka,
Scotland,
Kenya,
China,
Germany,
Somalia,
England.
I care about climate change because it's my future.
The climate topic became important to me when I realized how my own people are affected by it.
because it endangers the lives and livelihoods of virtually everyone I know.
So climate is a part of the ecosystem that keeps the planet healthy. If it's changing, I care what it does to me, my loved ones, and my offsprings.
Climate is important to me because I believe it affects every aspect of our lives, from the air we breathe, the food we eat, the habitats all around the globe, our ecosystems, our health, and above all, our future.
And that's not just humans, that's non-human species as well.
Climate change is not just a climate crisis, it's a human rights crisis. Many of the basic rights which we hold fundamental are already being threatened across the globe.
Humanity is constantly advancing, and I'm proud of its breakthroughs in many ways. But isn't all human striving in vain if we no longer live in a functioning world?
Climate change matters because it's one of the greatest crises that we are facing and will continue to deal with in the coming decades.
And what makes it worse is that everyone's on the same storm. Everyone's in the same storm, but we're all on different boats.
Some people from the least developed regions who yet have the smallest voice are already bearing the consequences of these tragedies.
We've seen the fatal impact it's had on Indigenous communities and our own societies, and those disastrous consequences will continue to worsen if we don't do something about it quickly.
Every day that action is not taken is a day closer to that irreversible chain reaction which will negatively change our planet forever.
It has saddened me teaching children in schools because I know they're going to be most affected by the climate crisis.
Without combating climate change, we can't look into the future with any hope.
Climate change and global warming are accountable for devastating changes to ecosystems worldwide.
Humankind will single-handedly destroy over 1 million species by 2050, a grotesque feat.
We are ravaging the very ecosystem that underpin our society.
If we continue on our current trajectory, biodiversity will be impacted tremendously, ecosystems could collapse, and this affects everything on this planet.
And it breaks my heart to see news titles in the media every day, such as animals losing their habitat over to wild bushfire or glacier meltings.
That we all share the same global biosphere and must do the most we can to ensure harmonious coexistence between humans and nature.
And we also need to be really careful that we don't let big important ecosystems pass that tipping point and go beyond the point where we can bring them back, such as the Arctic, because if the permafrost melts, then we're in for big trouble.
A directly climate-related typhoon hit my homeland Macau, causing 10 deaths around my neighborhood.
Even here in a more temperate region, you can see how climate change is making weather events more extreme.
Our country is highly vulnerable to impacts of extreme weather events, and one of the most common weather-related shocks affecting the country are floods, which bring about devastating effects.
I have ever seen heavy floods for several times, and have ever seen water up to this night.
This summer, my hometown was attacked by a serious flood.
A once-in-a-thousand-years rainbow devastated central China and caused hundreds of deaths in Henan province.
It is important to address climate emergency because anyone in the world, including my family, my friends, or someone I don't know in the global village may suffer from the large economic loss caused by those disasters.
We have to admit that global warming is affecting the food system.
We all need food, but over 800 million people go to bed hungry.
And it is estimated that by 2050, the world population is to be increased by more than 35%. So here lies a big question that if climate change is not controlled, then how are we going to feed the growing population then?
I foresee that climate change will lead to widespread poverty and food insecurity in my country.
Because I come from a country that mainly relies on agriculture in order to generate income, and in the recent years, this has been affected by climate change, therefore resulting into food insecurity in our country.
Here in the countryside where I live, droughts make farming difficult.
Here in Nigeria, a great factor like emissions from our industries, deforestation, bush burning has reduced the nutritional values in our crops.
Policymaking has indirectly stimulated meat production and consumption and put countries like China in a dilemma between economic development and sustainability.
Rising demand for meat will make it impossible to achieve the 1.5 target. A global shift to more plant-based, healthy diets will not only save lives, but also reduce land use pressure from food production, thereby significantly reduce emissions. Transforming food systems, especially changing diets, is the most powerful action that we can take to save the climate.
The most important change that we need to make collectively is to start working together in unison towards our joint goal of a greener planet.
What we need is a global understanding of climate change and its effects, and how all people can take part to combat it.
More international collaboration, we need a stronger resolution to make changes, and we really need the rise of public consciousness.
No single country can or should stay out of it, and it's about time we talk about concrete actions that penetrate straight to the root cause of climate change.
I want us to ensure that our economies are aligned with social and environmental needs instead of promoting growth for the very few.
Because the reality is that politicians are unlikely to care or act until something is electorally consequential. Just like healthcare, water, infrastructure, and other such issues are electoral issues, we need to work to make climate action first an electoral issue, and then an issue which has bipartisan support.
And the most important change we need to make to address this issue, treating it like the emergency it is. When the pandemic hit, no one thought twice about taking swift and decisive action because we were facing
thrive with nature across generations.
I have come up with a team of 7 young people here in Zambia working together to defend our trees and to replace wood charcoal with eco-friendly energy.
I'm currently a member of the United Nations Association Climate and Oceans Youth Council. We're an international group of young people and we organise projects which make changes happen in the fields of climatic, humanitarian and ecological issues.
I am the co-president for Sustainability Week Accra, a student-run organization in Ghana, co-creating climate-friendly events to promote sustainability to students, university staff, and the broad public, and encourage them to adopt a climate-friendly lifestyle.
I've been active with Fridays for Future in Germany since the beginning of 2019, and in recent months, I have been trying to bring about more and more change in climate policy.
I'm a member of the Lost and Damaged Youth Coalition, which advocates for finance for the severe cost of climate change by telling stories and training other youth to do the same.
Currently, I'm a volunteer of Youth Enterprise Services Malawi, which promotes initiatives to save youth in promoting their small businesses and also conducting disaster and risk reduction activities, especially in rural areas and minor districts.
I'm grateful to be an acting director of a local NGO back in Macau that advocates for climate action locally. My work there includes mobilizing resources, conducting climate-related research, and also empowering local community to start their own climate action.
I personally pledge to think consciously every day about the decisions I make.
I pledge to develop or support any local community projects that are constantly trying to reduce the waste in the environment.
To plant more trees in my community so as to address climate change in Nigeria.
To make more people aware of climate change and make a difference.
And I pledge to put pressure on supermarkets to take protective measures in the environments they source their products from.
I pledge to increase public awareness of how switching to a more sustainable diet can help combat climate change.
To keep the discussion around climate change and climate action active in my community.
To take climate action of teaching people about the concept of environmental sustainability, so we can create the largest number of ambassadors who want to save this planet by themselves.
To represent my country in national and international climate change negotiations.
I pledge to dedicate my life's work, research, and actions to pursuing and promoting more sustainable ways of producing the material that we need to continue our lives.
I vow to amplify the voices of those who should be leading us, indigenous groups who have learned how to coexist with nature, not seek mastery over it. I vow to relearn what it is to be a part of nature. I pledge my life to this task.
And this is my message to global decision makers. Young people from Africa are the least contributors to global warming, yet we will face the adverse impacts of the climate crisis if actions are not taken now. There is a need to enhance capacity building efforts in emerging economies to implement mitigation and, more importantly, adaptation efforts.
I call on the delegates from developed countries at COP26 to live up to your commitments under the Paris Agreement and the UNFCCC.
Turn your words into action. It is no longer enough to just declare a climate emergency. You need to actually work with your private sector and civil society and bridge the gap between the top-down and bottom-up approaches to create a truly holistic approach towards not just climate action, but climate justice for people and planet.
Acting now does not mean compromise. It means a better future for everyone, not just for your children, but yourselves. Because the climate crisis is now.
Stop focusing on your country's financial gains and start acting.
I'm calling on decision makers to make space, to listen, include, and be accountable to our demands and ideas.
Some of the decisions that you will have to make will not make you popular in the short term. But I need you to realize that those decisions can either save lives or destroy them.
We put our trust in you to help those who will be disproportionately impacted by climate change, whose voices cannot be heard, and whose lives and future are dependent on the state of our planet.
Please listen to the woman, not only the man. Please listen to the poor, not only the rich. Please listen to the young, not only the old.
In the next 20 to 30 years, our lives are the ones that are going to be the most severely impacted by climate change. So we need to be involved in the conversation on how to solve it and how to slow down the worsening effects.
Deliberation will kill us. Political agendas will kill us. We need you to be leaders that can make bold decisions and make fast decisions.
Because we've already run out of time. We need effective action from the moment this COP26 summit ends.
This summit must not have platitudes as a consequence. We must act now.
We're past talking. We're at a tipping point. We're at a place of no return.
Make the right choice. If not for yourself, then for your children and for everyone that lives on planet Earth.
So please listen. Please seize this opportunity to rebuild our planet in a positive, peaceful, eco-friendly way.
I would say to the global decision makers at COP26 that our future is in your hands. Please start working together and taking this seriously. Thank you.
Well, that was fabulous. Thank you so much and well done to all of the young people who contributed and to our colleagues at Bath and Cambridge who helped make that video happen. That was really powerful. I'd like to encourage all of the people in the audience to pop any questions or issues you'd like our panel to discuss into the question and answer box so that we can have a little bit of a discussion now. And if I can invite all of the panelists to put your cameras on now, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation, everyone all together. So I'm going to start by asking you all, I know we of course saw Kekashan and Hueu in that video. I don't know if either of you had actually seen it before, all compiled into the one video. But I just wanted to go across the panel and hear each of your reactions to seeing that, and maybe something that it might inspire you to do. Everyone's working already in this field. I'm going to start with Anna and then Caroline, and then I'm going to come back to Hueu and Kekashan as you were in the video, but hopefully it's stirred some emotions in you as well. So Anna.
Thank you, Alyssa. I found that extremely powerful. So congratulations to everyone who appeared in it and everyone who was behind the scenes making it as well. I felt like, with reference to Caroline's presentation, I felt like I was going on my own emotional journey watching that film and seeing people talking about the very real impacts that they're already experiencing and what they're worried about seeing in the future and what's likely to happen as well. So I thought it was extremely powerful, and I liked how you brought in so many different elements, kind of reflecting on what people were observing and then going to say what change they wanted to see, and also making pledges and seeing how young people can be empowered to act in this space as well as encourage other people to act. And I think that message about what we want from our governments is really important as well, because that young people can do an awful lot, but really the politicians need to be making some really strong, decisive decisions as well. So yeah, I'll stop there because I want to hear from everyone else as well. But thank you, it's a real treat to watch it.
Great, thanks, Anna. And if Caroline, as Anna said, this may be the kind of journey you're wanting everyone to go on. But if you can give us your reactions.
Yeah, just a very a short response. I agree with Anna, absolutely. It's a very powerful, impactful film. I felt quite emotional. And what was going through my mind was, it's so clear, it's so obvious, why are we not doing it? It's so straightforward. And it's that clarity that we hear from the way that the young people in these complex problems linking it to our research. By the failure, but you feel with thought the decisions.
Before, so I that obviously counter table.
our that
actually you have
Out. Education. Really the best.
fantastic.